Alright, I've got some time tonight in between checking cameras, let's take a look at another one. Meet Janiyah Khan. She recently popped up in a short-form video from Fusion. According to her own website, Khan is black, queer, gender non-conforming, and a social justice educator. She's the co-founder of BLM Canada. Let's see what she has to say.
It's not just one bad apple. The whole damn tree is rotten.
Hashtag not all seems to apply here. Abolish the police? That's a kind of a strange notion.
I think when people hear that we're anti-police, they think it's going to be chaos.
Well, yes, that would be the appropriate response. Fuck the police has been the standard battle cry of criminals and anarchists alike, and most normal people dislike both groups. While this may not be your exact slogan, it's awfully close.
The new abolitionist movement it's about transformative justice, non-prison, non-police-based strategies for dealing with violence and crisis in our communities.
How do you transform unrepentant murderers and hardcore drug dealers? Are you suggesting that we abolish any type of correctional facility and just let people wander free? How do you deal with psychopaths? Do you have any real solution to this perceived problem?
Who hasn't had a bad day? Who hasn't felt anxious or depressed? The question is, should anybody deserve to die because of it?
I've had a lot of bad days. Do I look like I'm made of sunshine and rainbows? Of course not. The difference is I haven't used those as an excuse for committing crimes, either of impulse or wanton desire. Being a criminal is a choice. One chooses to rob a store. One chooses to embezzle funds from the stewards. One chooses to peddle drugs to kids on the corner. Being depressed does not by itself cause crime or violence. There are, as always, other factors involved. The concept of mens rea, or guilty mind, is a legal concept shared throughout most of the modern world. In the United States, it's broken down into several categories. This includes purposely, knowingly, recklessly, and negligently. Drunk driving accidents are generally caused by reckless behavior, whereas shoplifting is a purposeful act. In the drunk driving case, the actor chose to drive while intoxicated, while in shoplifting, the actor chose to steal the Skittles.
The police's sole responsibility is to manufacture criminals.
No, the police's sole responsibility is to uphold the law. Don't try to redefine common terms to suit your agenda.
So here you have for-profit prisons. When you create space, you create a demand. That means that bodies have to fill those prisons. And we have seen that it's largely transgender people, it's black people, it is native people, it's Latinx people.
The inverse is true. More criminals created a demand for more space, and for-profit prisons sprang up to house them all. The prisons didn't magically appear and then demanded to be filled with the bodies of minorities. However, we have common ground. For-profit prisons are morally reprehensible, and in places where local law enforcement actively colludes with prison owners, this is the most egregious. The state and federal government should control the criminal justice system, and private prisons have direct conflicts of interest. More criminals means more money coming in, which means bigger dividends for stockholders. Here, we are in agreement. I suspect that minor drug users make up the overwhelming majority of guests in these prisons, largely thanks to the war on drugs fiasco. It's helped create a corrupt private system. In the great state where Quiet Mountain is located, we have several hundred prisoners placed in a private prison out of state. Fortunately, that contract is expiring, and hopefully the inmates will be returned to our loving embrace. The fact that minorities are overrepresented requires additional research into the surrounding circumstances for their incarceration. Most non-violent criminals and addicts should be rehabilitated and treated, then gently reintroduced into society so that they have a new chance at succeeding. Locking someone away for their natural life for minor drug offenses is repugnant.
When you have that demand, then you also have to create incentives. That trickles down to police, who also now have the incentive of creating criminals.
The only people who make profits are the private prisons. There is a problem with civil forfeiture in some states, but this is a separate issue from what you're referring to. More arrests make more paperwork for officers. Now, there are individual cases of judicial corruption, such as the Kids for Cash scandal in Pennsylvania. Here's the short version. 2 judges in Wilkes-Barre were convicted of accepting money from a builder of 2 private, for-profit juvenile detention centers in exchange for harsh sentences and sending kids to these prisons. The corruption was discovered and flushed out, just as it should be. Is this a reason to scuttle the whole justice system? Of course not.
It's not about justice anymore, it's about profit. I think we start with the demilitarization of the police. Police don't need assault weapons to protect people.
Assault weapon is a buzzword used by gun phobics. However, I agree with the general sentiment. Police are militarized to the point of being unable to handle minor conflict without rapidly escalating to the use of force. Of course, this isn't the case in all locations, but you can see it with increasing frequency. The solution here is to adjust tactics to resolve conflicts without escalation, though this isn't possible in all scenarios. Anytime you make a cop fear for his safety, you're gonna come out of this on the bad end of things. Maybe that's why it's a bad idea to grab for a cop's gun or grapple with him.
The second thing that we can do is really look at police budgets and create models and economies for that divestment from the institution of policing and the reinvestment in community models. That means taking money out of police budgets and slowly phasing out police because we don't actually need them in our communities. They don't keep people safe.
This is a lot of word salad. While I agree that community investment is a good thing, stripping money out of law enforcement is short-sighted and naive. You may think that you don't actually need them, but you do, because no community is fully safe. Just look at what happened in Ferguson and major cities where police disengaged from law enforcement in crime-ridden communities. Violent crime rates skyrocketed because there was no police presence to dissuade them or remove them from the streets.
You know, when you're looking at it from the lens of race in this country, it's absolutely easier to manufacture criminals around that. When people's skin becomes weaponized, particularly black skin, a book becomes a gun, a cell phone becomes a gun, a bag of Skittles becomes a gun. We don't have some personal war with individual police officers. What we do have is deep concern and a fight against the institution of policing.
The problem with a lens-based outlook is that if you zoom in too tight, you miss the bigger picture. The field of view becomes warped, and your sense of proportion goes out the window. Sure, you don't have some personal war with police, you just want to eradicate their job. And that's not personal at all. The police are not looking to specifically target African Americans. If you stop throwing your support behind thugs like Michael Brown and idiots like Keith Scott, you'd have more ground to stand on. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Brown attacked the responding officer, and Keith refused to put down his gun. Both resulted in their deaths. Sometimes a gun is a gun is a gun.
Undocumented communities know that they can't call the police in the event that crisis happens. A lot of black communities know that too. And so entire mosques, churches, communities, they have agreements where they won't call the police should something happen. And in its place, we've seen such a wonderful and diverse response when it comes to intervention in our communities.
This seems like a rather bold assertion, to which there is scant evidence to support it. While it seems like a wonderful paradise where nothing violent happens and no one gets mugged or murdered, it's woefully naive to think that neighborhood communities are fully capable of dealing with anything more than petty theft. Here's an article from Atlanta in which activists plea for people not to call the cops. Though I'm not surprised that illegal aliens choose not to call the police. Something about unclean hands and being there illegally might not sit well with the responding officers.
We've seen people rise up with trainings around mental health crisis, intimate partner violence crisis. We've seen rapid response justice teams, and I think that's really what we need to be building.
This sounds like mob justice to me, with no accountability. I found one reference to a rapid response justice team and got an international NGO called Justice Rapid Response, which turns out to be a completely different thing. Either she's lying or this is rarer than hen's teeth. From the way she's describing this as a cultural phenomenon from multiple communities, I have to go with the former.
Revolution isn't just the ending of something, it's the beginning of something new.
That's what the Bolsheviks said before setting up the firing lines. Khan represents a naive, overly idealistic worldview, padded with exaggeration and lies. While she seems to be more reasonable than other BLM headliners, Khan provides a lot of pie-in-the-sky preaching without a workable solution. Abolishing the police and replacing it with mob justice would make the situation worse, not better. Instead of having an orderly, accountable system of law enforcement where officers, judges, and attorneys alike are held to standards, she would instead see impassioned justice teams eke out punishment to those deemed in violation of the greater good. The greater good. No thanks, Janaya. I'll pass on your little...